15 starts a section about Absalom's conspiracy to overthrow David and his government. And so this coup takes a long time, and there's a lot of information. The problem with it is that unless you're really interested in politics, it's not very interesting as far as doctrine is concerned. So I'm not as interested in it perhaps as some of you will be, but it's basically just the story of a bloody coup by one of David's sons, and it just doesn't preach very well, at least not the way that I preach. But I want to make some observations from it. You're smiling at me. I'll tell you the truth, Connie. There are preachers that could really do great justice to these passages, but I ain't them. I just don't know what to do with it. What I want us to do tonight is just look at Absalom as a guy that we've seen on TV, someone that we're familiar with his personality type. He was a politician, and really kind of the worst sort of politician. And we'll look at 5 different things that we're told in Scripture that Absalom did to build up his clientele before he ever tried to have a coup against his father. Now, if you remember, he was in exile. He killed his half-brother, and he ran away and was living elsewhere. Joab decided that he wanted to bring him back because David seemed to miss him. So Joab cooks up this story and sends a woman to talk to David about how her 2 sons had been out and one son killed the other, and now they were going to get retribution and kill her other son, and she'd be all alone, and how could he allow that to happen? So David gets all worked up, as David would, and says, oh, well, I'll protect you. I'll make sure they don't do anything like that. She says, oh, but David, what about Absalom? He's your son, and you've allowed him to stay in exile. So we've been through all of that, and Absalom comes back. And if you remember at the end of chapter 14, Absalom was back in the area of Jerusalem, but he was ostracized. Joab didn't talk to him. He would call for Joab. Joab wouldn't come. He finally burns down some of Joab's fields to get his attention. That's the kind of intrigue that's going on in Jerusalem at the time that this is describing. So we're going to start in chapter 15, verse 1, and we're going to get all the way to chapter 15, verse 1. And notice the first thing about Absalom. In the course of time, Absalom provided himself with a chariot and horses and with 50 men to run ahead of him. We just glanced at it last week. One of the things you can do if you want to be a politician is to start out by telling people that you're already important. They need to support you because you're already somebody, and you're already somebody important. One of the weirdest things in the last 10 years has been the advent of TikTok and YouTube and all these different formats where people who are absolute nobodies can do something that is inane and ridiculous and have 1 million views. It's just the most baffling thing to me. Members of the church will forward a ridiculous meme on Facebook before they'll forward a sermon or a statement from Scripture. But it's where we are. I mean, that's where our society has ended up. And so there are lots and lots of people who are famous in their own areas with their own people. And so if you watch on TV sometimes, they'll have somebody on and they're called an influencer. You run across that? It's a new title, right? They're nobody. They do nothing, but they're influencers because they have an opinion, and so many people listen to their opinion that they're important. So Absalom starts out by making sure people understand how important he is. And so as he would go through the streets, he would have folks running ahead of him to make sure that people knew that Absalom was coming. And even if you didn't know who Absalom was and you didn't know why he was important, you knew he was important because he wouldn't have those guys running in front of him unless he was important. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I tell you I'm important, therefore you believe I'm important because I told you that I'm important. You don't have to have any more information beyond that. The second thing, look at verses 2 through 4. He would get up early and stand by the side of the road leading to the city gate. Whenever anyone came with a complaint to be placed before the king for a decision, Absalom would call out to him, "What town are you from?" He would answer, "Your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your claims are valid and proper, but there's no representative of the king to hear you." Right? So the second thing that you have to do is make sure that people understand that their lives would be better if they had you to represent them. And we've just gotten through the midterm elections. And there's two things in American politics has just fallen into the gutter. But you have to tell people that you're important and they need to support you, and you need to tell them why your opponent is horrible. Those are the two things you need to do. He was getting both things done before they ever got into town. He would get up early, which I guess if you want to be successful at anything in life, get up early and go get after it. So Absalom would stand outside the city gates, and as soon as somebody came through and he knew they were going to court, they were headed to talk to his dad or to one of his dad's judges, and he would just confront them. Where are you from? Why are you here? What's your case? You know, if you had somebody like me to speak your case for you, you'd do a lot better. And so he's just, why am I important? Because I can help you take care of what you need to have done. All you need is for me to represent you. And again, that infers that the current system is no good. You realize that if you go up there to my dad, you may not get justice. He may not care about your case. But if I was with you, if I was speaking on your behalf, then he'd have to listen because I've got 15 guys running in front of me. I'm important. I'm an influencer. I have a voice that needs to be heard. And these people were listening to Absalom tell them how important he was. And you might notice that there's no credentials here. Absalom doesn't say, you'd be better off if I defended you because I went to law school, because I'm wise, because God has given me a mission in life. None of that. Just, if I was your representative, life would be a lot better for you. Absalom would add, if only I were appointed judge in the land, then everyone who has a complaint or a case could come to me, and I would see that they receive justice. You can't get justice under the current regime. You're never going to be taken care of as you should, but if I was the judge, things would be different. Right? Verse 5. No. Yes. Also, whenever anyone approached him to bow down before him, Absalom would reach out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. Absalom behaved in this way toward all the Israelites who came to the king asking for justice, so he stole the hearts of the people of Israel. Now, in American politics, who do we kiss? Babies, right? If you go out and kiss the babies, that was always the campaign strategy for everybody. But with Absalom, anybody that came to go before his father's court, you need me as a representative. Life would be better if I was the judge. And notice how much I like you. Right? I'm honoring you. I'm kissing you. You came to honor me, but I'm pulling you up off of the ground. You're not going to genuflect to me. You're not going to bow to me. I'm going to pull you up, and I'm going to embrace you, and I'm going to give you a kiss. People like to feel like they're important. And if somebody important gives you affection, then you must really be important. I like to follow golf, and there are some of the PGA golfers who are very open to their clientele, right? People are following them, watching these tournaments, and they'll stop and they'll sign a lot of autographs and hand out, take their glove off and give it to somebody or give them a golf ball or all those kinds of things at these tournaments. And those guys are very popular because they take the time to talk to the clientele. And then there are some who just set their eyes toward the clubhouse and they come off the 18th green and they're walking straight to the clubhouse, and there could be 500 people of all shapes and sizes and ages calling their name. They're just going to keep walking straight ahead because they've got no time to deal with people like that. Well, I don't like those guys. The fact that they can play golf well is nice, but I want somebody to play golf well and be nice, to care about people, to show them some kind of appreciation that they spent ridiculous amounts of money to go follow them around for a day and watch them play a game. It's Absalom's maybe greatest asset, even besides he's built up his case, right? Look at me, I'm important. Wouldn't it be better if I was the judge? And look at me, I care about you. I really want you to be happy. And I'm not above you. I'm not somebody who's lording it over you. I'm giving you credit for being a human being and being a good person. And so I kiss you, and all the people began to fall for what Absalom was giving them. Right? Verse 7. At the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, "Let me go to Hebron and fulfill a vow I made to the Lord. While your servant was living in Geshur in Aram, I made this vow. If the Lord takes me back to Jerusalem, I will worship the Lord in Hebron." Now there's a couple of weird things going on here. Let me make the main point, and then I'll talk about what I think is weird. Stay the course. It's been 4 years. Right? He did all of these things repeatedly for a long time. And at the end of 4 years, now he's ready to spring the trap. But the things I find weird are that, we don't know for sure whether he made this vow. If we take him at his word and say, yeah, he made the vow, okay. We do know that that's not the only reason he wants to go to Hebron. And again, in the United States, we've gotten used to people making campaign promises. And then when you begin to pick those things apart, you find out that here's what I say I'm going to do, and here's what I really meant when I said what I was going to do. Both sides of the aisle, you can just count on it. There's certain things they want you to know, certain things they don't want you to know. So you follow them and you try to pick through all of what they say and find out as much truth as you can. The other thing that I find interesting here is that he says, if I can get back to Jerusalem, I'll go worship the Lord in Hebron. Where was the Ark of the Covenant? It was in Jerusalem. He lived down the street from the tabernacle. I don't know why Hebron was so important to him or why he would want to go and worship there. I may have to do a little more research and see why that would be important. It was one of the places that Israelites worshiped, but why? If you get back to Jerusalem, would your promise be that you would go and worship God at Hebron? Now, David buys it. He says, that's fine. I give you my blessing. Go and do what you need to do. But one of the things that Absalom did that made him, I guess, a good politician was he told half-truths. He let people know what he wanted them to know. What Hebron really is the staging ground for the coup. He's going to go down there under the guise of worshiping God, and he's going to start gathering people together to overthrow the government. So look at verse 9. The king said, go in peace, so he went. Then Absalom sent secret messengers throughout the tribes of Israel to say, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpets, then say, Absalom is king in Hebron. 200 men from Jerusalem had accompanied Absalom. They had been invited as guests and went quite innocently, knowing nothing about the matter. While Absalom was offering sacrifices, he also sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, which was David's counselor, to come from Gilo, his hometown. And so the conspiracy gained strength, and Absalom's following kept on increasing. No, you've got folks that were traveling with him. Why would you need 200 people to go to Hebron with you because you were going down there to worship, to fulfill a vow? But hey, he's popular. He told us he was. He'd make a great judge. He told us he would. He's a good guy. He loves everybody. He kissed my uncle last week. My uncle went down there to talk to David, and David hardly had any time for him, but Absalom embraced him, told him how glad he was that he came to town. We know he must be a good guy. So he's invited us, and we're all honored to go with him, and they travel down to Hebron and suddenly find themselves in the middle of a coup. Absalom is going to overthrow his father and take the kingdom. Now you notice he said that when you hear the signal, tell everybody that Absalom is king in Hebron. But that's not his ultimate goal either, is it? Absalom wants to be king in Jerusalem. He wants his daddy's house. He wants to own the citadel, the top, the city of David as we call it now, that very top of the mountain. That's what he wants. And eventually, that's what he's going to have. It'll be a short period of time that he owns it, but he's going to get what he wanted this entire time. Now, the next chapter heading, the next section heading for you is probably David flees. I think we'll hang on to that. But if you want to read ahead, as you begin reading through 15, 16, 17, what you get is a lot of espionage. Absalom has spies, David has spies. Everybody's trying to get the right people in the right place to report back and forth as to who has the upper hand, which army is on the move, all those kinds of things. And again, like I said, for me, it's hard to preach. There's not much going on in this section of Scripture that has any real doctrine to it. There's not much thus saith the Lord going on. And the reason for that is David slept with Bathsheba. That's the whole problem. It started the ball rolling, and now there's never going to be a time when there's not problems in the household of David. And when Absalom finally moves his kingdom, when he gets finished in Hebron and moves to Jerusalem, every single prophecy that was made against David by Nathan is going to come to not just kind of fulfillment, but absolutely perfect, shining, can't miss the point fulfillment through the hand of Absalom. So hang on to that thought, and Lord willing, we'll take up maybe 2 or 3 chapters next week in a hurried fashion. Any thoughts or questions about this? You may be far more interested in this passage than I am. Is there something that just jumps out at you?
When did he start speaking to the king again?
At the very end of 14, there's a passage that he complains to Joab, and eventually David invites him, and they embrace. It says that he went to David's house, and David kissed him. So there's a reunification at that point. And then from that point on, just like the next couple of verses, then we get this about Absalom having the guys run in front of him. He is the royals' royal. Think about the royals of Great Britain. There are certain ones of them that are very reclusive. They don't care much about being royals. They don't want everybody up in their business, and they just kind of stay to themselves. And then every now and then you get a royal who's a royal, and he wants everybody to know it. And so the pomp and the pageantry is the thing for them. Well, for Absalom, he was a son of the king. He was a prince. He was pretty much the heir apparent since he killed Amnon. I guess in a way, just the pomp and pageantry of having somebody run in front of you and say, well, here comes Absalom, makes sense if you're a royal who wants to be a royal. But he had other sons, other daughters, that it doesn't seem that they were in that same mindset, that they wanted everybody to pay attention to them or to escalate their place in society.
Jay, in verse 7, you said after 4 years,
Yes.
some other, New King
King James?
I'll get it out. It says 40.
No.
What is the other guy, Josephus? There's two other scriptures that Josephus has said 4.
I will check Josephus on it. I have a note that some of the Septuagint manuscripts, which would be the Greek translation of the Hebrew Old Testament, say 40.
Yeah, that's what it says. It's
Yeah.
the most
I guess it's the same outcome one way or the other. It would be much more amazing that he held out for 40 years to get the job done. But I'll do a little research on that and see.
It's just interesting.
Yeah. David, one of the things you have to take into account there is David only ruled for about 40 years. So when David comes in to power, he's 30, I think. So if he rules 40 years, he's 70. Absalom is born after he's king. He's king for 40 years. So the math wouldn't work. So I tend to think maybe the translation we've got here is correct. But I'll track it down and see what I could find out. Now that part is interesting to me. For no apparent reason, I will track that down. Anybody else?
I apologize.
Oh, no, not at all.
Latest translation in the Bible we got here in the church says 4.
Says what?
Says 4.
4? Yeah, I think those are NIVs. I'm reading out of the NIV. Anybody have New American Standard? You do? What the New American Standard has 40? Okay, that's interesting. I think just calendar-wise, 4 makes more sense. But if you start this, here we go.
I didn't know if it meant 4 years or if the 40, it meant when Absalom was 40 years old at that time frame. I didn't know.
Oh, well, until he was 40 years,
Yeah.
he would be more acceptable as a king at 40 than he would have been whenever he
It
started.
didn't really, it just says after 40 years, after what?
Yeah.
I don't
Please feel
understand.
free to put comments on this